It's time for a story, kids! I'm going to tell you all there is to know about Beatrice the bee and the rest of her species, Apis mellifera. But if you find that too confusing, you can just call them by their other name, the European honeybee. Beatrice and her friends and family live in a hive located in the hollow of a tree. They put it there to protect it from the elements and make it harder for predators to get at them. All bees want to make sure that they have just the right amount of friends. Any less than about 8,000 bees in a hive makes gathering food for the winter very difficult, but any more than about 80,000 bees makes the hive too crowded. Hives just like the one Beatrice lives in can be found all over the world. In fact, the only place you can't find them are extremely hot and dry zones like the Sahara Desert, or extremely cold places like Greenland. This is because Beatrice's distant ancestors were brought all over the world by people that traveled from Europe on ships. Luckily for Beatrice, though, there aren't too many of these hives around her. Although it might be fun to have some friends, if there were too many other hives around, she and the other families of bees would have to start fighting over the same flowers. This is called intraspecific competition, because they're competing with other members of the same species. This limits how densely populated with bees an area can be, but that's enough facts for now. Let's get back to Beatrice. We'll start with how she was born. Beatrice started off life just like any other bee. Her mother, the queen, laid an egg. Just like all the other members of Apis mellifera that had come before her, Beatrice would have to go through 3 other stages before becoming a fully grown bee. Egg, where the bee's basic development happens. Larva, where a bee emerges as a tiny grub and eats as much food as possible to gain energy. And finally pupa, where the larva transforms into the bee itself. But Beatrice was not like the other bees. When she hatched from her egg and emerged as a larva, the other worker bees started feeding her a substance called royal jelly. This makes a bee grow into a queen instead of a worker. Beatrice, though still a larva, was now a princess. Her mother decided to make Beatrice into a queen because the hive was just too crowded. Not long after she laid Beatrice, her mother took about half the bees in the colony in what's called a swarm and went to find a new home, leaving Beatrice to become queen when she was ready. A few days after finishing her diet of royal jelly, Beatrice was ready for her transformation. She entered her pupa stage. While resting in this state, Beatrice had horrible nightmares. She dreamed about all the nasty, dangerous things that prey on her species that she had overheard the other bees talking about. Mockingbirds grabbing her out of the air, a swarm of hungry wasps, and even frogs. Luckily for Beatrice, though, her colony, and her species in general, are equipped with a couple different methods for dealing with predators like these. First of all, every worker bee is equipped with a stinger. Stingers are like tiny needles filled with poison that can be stabbed into an attacker. Once a bee inserts its stinger, though, it can't pull it out without also pulling out part of its own body, which usually ends up killing it. Along with stingers, bees use pheromones to help defend themselves. Pheromones are like smells that bees can use to tell others what's happening in the hive. For example, if a hive was attacked by some kind of predator, a bee could put a pheromone on it that would tell the other bees in the hive to watch out, or maybe even to sting it. Despite this, when Beatrice woke, she knew that she had to be queen to make sure that her hive was defended and safe. Unfortunately for her, however, she was not the only egg that was laid with the possibility of becoming queen. The first thing Beatrice did when she emerged from her chrysalis as a queen bee was decide that there was nothing else for it. With the well-being of the colony in mind, she brutally murdered all of her infant siblings that could possibly grow to become queens. This may not sound very nice, but Beatrice really did not like usurpers. With this out of the way, Beatrice decided to get right to her main job as queen, laying eggs. Only a week after being born, she walked to the entrance of the hive and took flight for the first time. She needed to find daddies for her eggs. In the bee world, the males that become daddies are called drones. A drone's only job is to find a queen, like Beatrice, and become a father to her eggs. Beatrice had to find 15 drones for her to be able to make the 1,000,000 eggs that she would produce in her lifetime. Upon returning to the hive, Beatrice got to work. She had to lay over 1,000 eggs a day just to keep the colony going. She needs to keep up this extremely high fecundity because she is the only one in the hive that will ever produce offspring, at least until a new queen is born. Beatrice's eggs can grow to be 3 different kinds of bee, depending on what she wants and what the colony needs. They can be queens, drones, or workers. As I mentioned before, a drone's only job is to help a queen make babies. Drones usually live for about 90 days, but if they find a mother to mate with, they die immediately after doing so. Beatrice can lay other queens just like herself in case she needs to be replaced, or the hive gets too big and she's put in the same situation as her mother was. Queen bees live the longest out of any type, usually over 4 years. Worker bees make up most of the colony. They are extremely important. They do everything from gather food, to tend to the young, and even defend the colony if it's in danger. Unfortunately, these busy little guys usually die in only a month and a half. When she laid her eggs, Beatrice couldn't help but notice what good care the workers took of them. They tried to make sure that each and every larva would survive until bee stage. In other words, this nurturing attitude towards young is a perfect example of a K-type survival strategy. Sometimes Beatrice herself wished that she could experience what it's like to be a worker bee. Usually, the reason she felt like that was because she got bored just laying eggs. Worker bees have so many activities that they do, and all of them are so important to the survival and success of the colony. The job that Beatrice always thought would be the most fun is foraging. Foragers bring nectar and pollen from flowers back to the hive. Pollen is eaten by the bees, and nectar is turned into honey that is stored for the winter months. While traveling from flower to flower, bees pollinate them, helping plants to reproduce. Without the flowers, bees would have no food, and without bees, it would be very difficult for flowers to spread. This act of working together is called a symbiosis. Workers also tell each other where large groups of flowers are so that they can forage better. They do this through pheromones, those smells we talked about earlier, as well as pointing them out through little dances. Beatrice always thought they looked very silly while dancing, but she could not deny its effectiveness. In fact, they're so effective that bees usually take up all the flowers in the area and make it very difficult for other insects to be successful as well. This is called interspecific competition because the bees compete with another species for the same resource. Despite the fact that Beatrice badly wanted to try this job out, foraging is not all fun and games. Workers can be killed by predators and disease while working. As a result, bees die off at about the same rate regardless of age, making them have a very straight survivorship curve. This made Beatrice very sad because often her friends wouldn't come back to the hive after leaving on a mission to gather food. Beatrice was finding that more and more of her friends were not making it back, and she was getting very worried. Hives like hers carry out a large portion of the pollination of crops that people eat, but in return, her and her bees are getting very sick. Chemicals called pesticides are hurting bees, and Beatrice is afraid that her colony will eventually lose many of its members to the nasty sprays that poison their food. This is where Beatrice's story ends and yours begins. Beatrice needs your help to keep colonies like hers safe. Without bees, the plants that we and so many other animals depend on will be in big trouble. It might not be easy, but it's the right thing to do. You may not have wings like her, but Beatrice believes that you can soar.